Welcome back to my channel, everyone. For today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I paint the edges of my books. As an example, I have the books that I've already done this with. So this was the first book that I tried it out on because if you've watched my review, you know that I didn't really like this book. So I figured if some of the paint got on the inside, I wasn't going to worry too much because I probably will not read this one again. But anyway, so I painted it red first, and then I later went in and just added like tentacle details, which honestly could have been better, but it was fun. I thought the red was just kind of too much. I wanted to break it up a little bit, so I added those in. So it's not perfect. Up here there is some that kind of chipped off a little bit, but this was the first one I did and I think it turned out pretty well. Didn't get it on the pages inside too much, so overall this one was a big success. And from here I went on to paint 4 more books. I painted these 4, which this is the Chronicles of Fairy series, all 4 of these. So I painted them. The colors do not go together as well as I had originally thought they might. I did these 2 first, so the purple one and then this like orangey brownish color. I did these 2 first, and then I went in later and did these 2, and I really like these 2 more. So for this one and the orangey brown one, the paint was way too thick. I put it on too thick, and then as I was taking the pages apart afterwards, it all kind of chipped off. So when I did this one and this one, I had a trick that I will show you in this video, but I had a trick that made it work out a lot better. Yeah, they looked a lot better. The paint didn't stick as much, and when I took the pages apart, it didn't peel off very much either. These 2 are the last 2 that I did, and they're definitely big successes. I do actually have one other. Okay. This was actually the second one that I did. I did this actually pretty much the same time that I did To Kill a Kingdom, and I think it turned out really well. This is possibly my favorite one just because I love this peachy color. It's a lot darker and oranger in person, but I think it's really nice. I don't know how I can like show it darker, but anyway. But yeah, this one I thought turned out really, really well too. So the book that I'm going to be painting the edges of today is this one, The Karma Club. I have not read this one. I don't know if I'll ever read this one. I just picked it up at a thrift store for $1 because it did sound interesting. I thought I might eventually read it, so $1 wasn't too bad. But I want to be painting the edges. I'm not quite sure yet what color I'm going to be doing them. I might do them this color or possibly the greenish bluish color here. I'm still deciding. But I have to decide soon because I want to go paint the edges. But anyway, this is the one that I will be showing you, and I will tell you the tricks that I've learned along the way and just how I do it, because it's been working out for me. As you saw, there are only 2 books that it really didn't work out too well on, and I know what the problem was with those, and I have since fixed it. So hopefully this one turns out really, really well. I hope that you enjoy this, and if you've been thinking about painting the edges of your books, I promise it is easier than you think, and totally worth it. Just maybe for the first couple books that you do this with, at least the first one, pick a book that you don't really care about too much because something could go wrong, and if it's a special edition book or a book that you just really love and don't want anything to happen to, I wouldn't recommend doing that as your first one because just things can go wrong. Anyway, let's get into painting the edges of the book. So for this project, you are of course going to need a book. As I said before, if this is your first time doing this, a book that you don't really care about. So I'm going to be using this one. I have done this before, but I don't think I'll ever read this one, so I want to try to paint the pages. Yeah, so you need a book, of course. You're going to need your paints. I just use acrylic paints, and I'm going to try to mix these 2 and hope that they turn out like this color. We'll see how it goes. Paintbrushes, of course. I'll get into what paintbrushes I use in a minute. Something to cover the cover of the book with. So I'm going to take the dust jacket off, but then you want something to cover the rest of the cover just so you don't get any paint on that. And if these don't fit, I've used these for other books, but if they don't fit, I can resize them, tape them up again. Some clamps to keep the book nice and tight, to keep the pages all nice and tight. So you need some clamps or something heavy to put on the book, but clamps are definitely very, very helpful. And then, of course, you're going to need something to rinse your brushes with, and then I have a snack and a computer because I like to watch something while I do this because it generally takes a little while. Not too long, especially since I'm only doing 1 book. The last time I did this, I did 4 books at the same time, I think, and that took a lot longer, of course. But yeah, this is all you need. There's really not very much. And now I will get into the actual process. So I'm not entirely sure that this is the best camera setup, and I will probably be changing the setup throughout this video, but just to get started, I'm gonna leave it like this. I forgot to mention that you're going to need something to put your paints on, of course, and then it's always helpful to have either a rag or paper towels or something to dry your brushes with, and just to clean up any messes that might occur. It's always nice to have these. The brushes that I'll be using, I'll probably mainly be using this one. I like to have a much thicker brush just to get the main area of the pages. And then need a little tiny brush for getting in these areas so that you don't risk getting paint all over here. And then I'm probably not going to use all of these, but I do just have some other sized brushes, some kind of mid-sized brushes. So yeah, so this is what I'm working with. Can you see those well enough? Okay. Okay. And I did end up deciding to do it this color, so I'm going to try to mix these. I recommend when you're mixing the paints for this, if you have to mix them, mix more than you think you're going to need because you might end up using it. And if you run out, you don't want to have to mix it again and then have the wrong color and have it not match all the way around the pages. So yeah, I'm going to be mixing these. Before that though, let's just set up the book. So you have to take the dust jacket off. Okay, let's take the dust jacket off, and now I'm left with this one. That's really pretty. Yeah, so I'm going to be trying to do the colors similar to this. And then I have these that I've used for other books. I'm going to see if they fit on here. If they do, that'll be awesome. If not, then I'll just have to retape them. So, perfect. Okay. All right, here's one. All right, so this is awesome because they fit perfectly. I guess if you have like a standard book size and a lot of your books are that size, then saving these pages can be kind of helpful. They're not thick, you know, you're just gonna shove them in somewhere and then you can reuse them. And they come pretty much right up to the edge. I'm not gonna do anything with this area. You can try to cover this with, I'm not exactly sure what. You'd have to look at a different video for that because I don't cover it with anything. People may have used painter's tape, but I'm kind of afraid that'll hurt it. But that's why I have this tiny brush. That's why I have this little brush, because then I can get right up to the edge without painting over places that I shouldn't be. So now we have the paper on. It is actually a little bit big, but that'll be all right. So I did actually turn these around because since it's folded over here, when the folds are on the inside, you can't get the pages quite as tight, and I have found that it's a little bit problematic, so I just turn those around. If you have any folds or anything from the paper, it's better to tape that on the outside, but if you're just taping the paper right to the book, which I don't recommend because it can tear the paper off of the book. So like here, there's this little page, and if you put the tape right on there, you might tear that up. So I just taped the paper to itself, which works a lot better. But anyway, if you have any folds or anything, keep them on the outside rather than the inside. It'll just make it a little bit easier. So now I'm going to put the clamps on, make sure these pages are just about as close to the binding as they can be. So I generally use 4 clamps, 1 on each corner, and that does mean that this area here isn't quite as tight, but I haven't had an issue with that really. The clamps can get in the way, they make it a little bit difficult, but when I move on to the edges, I'm just going to rotate these a little bit, keeping them as tight as I can as I rotate them. I'm just gonna rotate them so that then I can get the edges better. And you'll see that. But anyway, I guess I'll get right into this. If I remember, I will try to change the camera angle at some point. But for now, let's just get into it. So I have to mix my paints first, and then I will get painting. I have this broken piece of a paintbrush that I generally use to mix the paints. I just use the end of it. It works better than using the brush part of a paintbrush, because then you just get paint all over it. So this works out pretty well. Alright, so the color is not perfect, but I think that's going to be close enough. I had to also use some yellow, and I have a color that is fairly close. I could probably fool with it more and get it perfect, but I don't really want to. I have enough paint, so yeah, we're going to go with that. It's actually almost exactly the color of the cover there. It's just not the color of the dust jacket, but it's close enough. I'm going to go with it. So my trick that I learned last time was to put some water in with the paint, because just like this, the paint is kind of thick, and these pages are probably going to be fine, but the two books that I showed you earlier that had a lot of the paint missing on them where it had come off, the pages were really, really old and they were kind of beveled as well. So these pages would probably be fine, but I am also just going to show you this trick. So the trick I learned was just to add some water to it. I want to do this without actually getting paint on this paintbrush right now, but not a ton, just several drops, you know, until you think it's going to be okay. So adding some water, I'm going to mix it around, and that just thins down the paint quite a bit and makes it easier to put it on, and yeah, and then it's not as thick when you put it on either, so that's the point. Yep, of course. Okay, I'm just going to stop talking. So I think I'm going to add just a little bit more. I don't need a lot, but I want to add like another drop or two. Make sure you mix the water in all the way, because it tends to not want to mix too well. Yeah, if you just mix it in all really well, get like bubbles and stuff out. Okay, so that's at least a little bit thinner. I think that'll be fine for this book, but if I'm putting it on and I feel like it's too thick, I'm definitely going to add some water. Now that my paint is all mixed, which took 16 minutes, which took like, I don't know, 10 minutes or something. Now that my paint is all mixed, I can start painting onto the cover. So I generally get my brushes a little bit wet, pat them off, and then just get going. You don't want them to be super wet though. You want to put the paint on as thin as you can, so I'm going to try to do that. Alright, so anyway, here we go. So another tip is to be careful around the corners here, because I tend to gather a lot of paint on the corners, so I try to also just wipe it off every once in a while. So yeah, be careful about the corners, but I'm just putting the paint on as I can, trying to get all the paint out of the paintbrush before I re-dip, because like I said, you don't want it to be too thick. And I'm now noticing that I also should have gone through and made sure that none of the pages were folded over, because there are a couple spots in here that are a little bit folded. So that's another tip that I didn't do, but I'm not super worried about this book. It'll look nice and the paint's not going to get too much on the inside. So we're just going to keep going. All right, new angle. Let's see how this goes now. I'm going to be using a smaller brush now to get in the edges here. Make sure it's nice and dry. So here we go. So another thing that I do sometimes when I just have small parts that need more paint, but I don't want to be adding more paint, I will just take a little bit of, I'll dip my brush in the water and get most of the water off, but still have a little bit. And then I'll just use that, and it just kind of spreads a little bit of the paint. I wouldn't recommend doing this super often because you don't want to get your pages very wet, but just for small parts, it works out pretty well because it keeps the paint from getting too thick, while also making sure every part is covered. So I think that's it for this edge. It's looking pretty good. I actually do really, really like this color, so that was a great pick by my mom. Depending on how you hold it, sometimes there looks like there's still some more white, but I think that's mostly because there are a couple gaps in the pages. So I'll touch it up before I completely finish, but now we have to move on to the edges. So for that, I'm just going to slide this, oops, and I'm going to slide this one. Okay, so just slide them so now they're kind of angled so that I can actually get to this area and make sure it's right on the edge. And that's something I didn't mention before, but when you're doing this with the clamps, you want them to be as close to the edge as possible so they keep it nice and tight. So I gotta move this one up a little bit. It's giving me some trouble, but yeah, I'm gonna be doing this part next. So now I have full range of it. I don't have to work around the clamps. So yeah, now I'm gonna work on this part. I'm gonna use the big brush again for most of it, but I will only be going, I'll be leaving a little gap here to do with a smaller brush because I don't want to get paint all over this area. So be careful there. And now I'm going to use my very tiny brush to get up in this area. So here we go. This is the hardest part and it takes the longest even though it's the smallest part. Okay, 2 sides down, 1 to go. I think the hardest part of this is holding the book this entire time because it gets very tedious. Alright, so now we just let this dry for a couple hours. It usually dries pretty quickly actually, but I like to just leave it for a few hours just to be sure. So I'm going to go about other things today. I have some other things to do. It's a beautiful day outside actually. And just as a note, you want to keep the clamps on while it's drying. Don't take them off until you're sure that it's dry. So I'm going to leave it for a couple hours, let it dry, and then I will come back to show you how to finish this. Alrighty, so it is actually the next night after I painted the edges of this book. I completely forgot about it last night. I could have dealt with it last night, but I forgot about it. We watched a movie, whatever. Anyway, so tonight I'm going to be taking it apart. I have some tea in my lovely Strange the Dreamer mug, so I'll be enjoying that. And I'm gonna just watch some booktube while I take these pages apart. But I'll show you, first of all, I'll show you how I start it at least. So, of course, you gotta take the clamps off. And then very carefully to get these pages apart, I just kind of pick them apart very carefully, very slowly. Slide your finger along in between the pages, just very carefully, like when you're opening a letter. I think it's the most satisfying sound. I love it. Alright, I still have a page that's stuck here, so I'm just going to very carefully get that one off. And now I can at least remove one of these. So I think the color is looking pretty good. It's not perfect, but I think it's going to look really nice. Just have to... Alright, that one came right off. So take those off. Now you have your pages and they're all stuck together. So through watching other people doing this and then through doing it 6 times myself, I have some tricks. So just very gently bending the pages. Bending them one way and then the other, trying to break them up as much as you can all the way through. And then the same thing this way, just carefully and gently Not too much. It's not going to hurt the book. You're not hurting the spine or anything. Just carefully. Also maybe fanning the corners a little bit to make it easier. Yeah. Just getting it apart where you can. And then I like to kind of just take apart some chunks. Again, sliding your finger very carefully through them. So this is going to be a very long and tedious process. This is the most tedious part of the entire process. This was extremely tedious when I was doing the Book of Dreams, because that book is like 600 and some pages long. I had to go through page by page and carefully take them all apart. But I just watched YouTube or watched a movie or something while I did it, and it's a pretty nice way to like pass the time. If you're going to be watching something anyway, you may as well do this, because it's not too bad really. It just takes a very long time. But anyway, yep, just going through page by page to get them all apart. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm not going to like sit here and talk the entire time. I just wanted to show you a little bit of, some tips that I do. Still just going through and getting apart whatever is easiest. And now let's just get into it. So I haven't done very much so far, but I can already tell that I must have put the paint on too thick, just a little bit, because it is kind of coming up a little bit white here. I know other people have said to take a damp cloth and then just gently wipe this once you've done all the pages. I do that a little bit, but I've found that this is pretty much just like the paint peeling up. So I did this one a little bit thick, but overall I think it's going to look fine. I'm going to try to get some of that off later, but anyway, yeah, we're making our way through. Here's a page that got dog-eared that I definitely should have gone through before and made sure was not dog-eared, because now it's going to have absolutely no paint on it, which just doesn't look quite as nice. But I always forget to do that, and even if I remembered, I probably still wouldn't, just because it would take so much extra time that I just don't care to spend the time on. But anyway, if you are super nitpicky about these things and you want your book to look as perfect as possible, yeah, try to make sure none of the pages are dog-eared like this. Alright, and that took less than half an hour. That took 20 minutes, which actually is not bad. I wasn't tearing through it, I was just taking my time, and it only took 20 minutes. So, yeah, all done, all the pages taken apart. Some people, I think, also like do this as they're reading the book, but I think that would be so annoying to have to pause. Like you get to something and you have to pause and take the page apart. And the other problem with that is that I don't know if I'll ever read this book, and if I do, it's going to be a very, very long time from now. So yeah, I'd kind of like to have the pages nice before then. I don't think I need to take a cloth along here because the only places where, you know, there's something here, but that's just some of the paint chipping off, so I'm probably just going to pick that off because it drives me nuts. A couple places here. But yeah, I think overall it actually looks really, really nice. Yeah, I'm happy with this one. I'll put the cover on and let you see that. And here is where all the dog-eared pages were. This one was really big. So yeah, definitely try to remember to look for any dog-eared pages. Done that and I just totally forgot. But anyway, I'm gonna put the cover on and we can see how it looks. Okay, so here's the book and the colored pages, and I didn't match it exactly, but I really, really love this color. I don't know why. I really love this pink. Like, I don't think I would love it for anything else, but it works really, really well as the colored pages for this book because it's just so bright and fun. I'm really not a big fan of the color pink, but I think this turned out really well. I'm really happy with it. I feel like it suits the book pretty well, what I think that the book is about. So yeah, that's how it turned out. Now I've got nice sprayed edges, and when I put it back on my shelf, it's going to be nice and pink instead of just white, since I haven't read this one and it's going to be facing like this. So yes, I'm very, very happy with this. Let me turn the camera up. Hello. Okay, so here's my tutorial for how to paint the edges of your book. I'm not perfect at this, but I have now done 7 books, and I always find it very fun, and I've never had any big mishaps. Like, I've never torn pages really bad. Every once in a while, I'll tear one just a tiny bit if I'm not being careful when I'm taking them apart, but that's pretty rare. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was helpful, and if you end up painting any of the edges of your books, totally let me know how it turns out. You can post a picture on Instagram and tag me or something. That would be really awesome. I would love to see. I love sprayed edges, and I was so happy to find out that doing it myself is not as hard as I thought it would be. So anyway, there you go. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you have any tips on how to do this, leave them in the comments below for other people and for me as well. Definitely let me know if you have a better way to do this. And that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you in the next one, and have a blessed day.